Hi there, so we are going to do a stargazer lily, and well, the first stages anyway of the stargazer lily. What you will need is either a 20 or a 21, 22 gauge wire, and we're going to do twizzles to start with because we're going to wire 6 individual petals. So I'm doing it with a green wire, just so that you can see it basically. So I'm going to put a bit of glue on the end of my wire, get a small piece of flour or modelling paste, push that onto the end of the wire like that, and then draw that paste, twizzle it down the wire so that it's covered. Make sure you've got plenty covering the end, because that's where the wire will poke through the petal if we're not too careful. So there's the twizzle ready prepared. Now I sent an email with the leaf petal template. If you've got a cutter, that's great. It is just a leaf shape. Now you want the twizzle to be about 1/2 to 2/3 the length of your petal. So that's that ready. I've rolled out my flour paste onto a Trex board, cut out my template. So this is the basis that you could do for any flower. So you don't have to have cutters for every flower under the sun. You can always pull a petal off of a flower and make your own template. I'm just using a knife to cut out around that template. And as I said, what we're going to need is a total of 6. Don't make them all at the same time because your paste will dry out. What you then need to do, so there's my petal. I haven't gone too thin because we are going to be pushing in some quite deep marks into the petal itself. I'm placing that in a petal veiner. Now this one is a tea rose petal veiner, but anything that's got some vertical lines on it, ridges, is brilliant. So like the corn on the cob, or if you have a lily veiner, that's great. Tess, handy hint, used some cling film folded over and over to give lots of little lines, and then rolled over the top of the cling film. That works a treat too. So you're going to then place your twizzle so that the end of the twizzle is at the base of the petal. Put that down onto your petal. Put the lid on and really push down so you get all those nice veins, but you also are securing your twizzle stick to the petal. Take that lid off. Twizzle's completely disappeared, and then we should be able to pull that petal away. If your petal gets stuck to these sort of things, you just put a bit of dust of corn flour on your veiners. So then you need to use either a cocktail stick or a veining tool. This is a veining tool. The thinner end has got quite a sharp ridge on the back, and you need to put a central ridge down your petal. So hopefully you can see on there. Then what I'm going to do is to give that wire a bend. So make sure you position your fingers on the end of that wire, because otherwise it will poke straight through your icing, so that when you leave it to dry, your petal is going to curve back in that sort of position. Using your foam pad and some corn flour and your ball tool, you just want to frill half on, half off along the top 2/3 down to the point of that petal, just to thin it out and give it a little bit of a frill, not too much. So it's going to, and then we're going to place it in a shaped, these are fruit packaging. So I'm going to place it in there so it forms and dries in a shaped position. So mine managed to dry in this room after 2 hours, but it does depend on the heat in your kitchen. But then you will have a petal that has dried like that, and it'll be nice and firm and ready to dust. If you have a tea towel down on your work surface, because there is nothing worse than smashing your petal and your leaf that you have just worked really hard to make. So what you're going to do is start off, sorry I keep disappearing to try and find things, you're going to start off at the base of your petal. So hold your wire like that and get some green, and you brush down sort of the bottom quarter of your petal and brush it down towards your wire with green. Then you need some yellow, so you can use the same brush because you're going to blend the two together. So then coming further up and blending down into that green with the yellow, like that. And then you take a different brush to get your pinky colour. So load your brush, turn your petal now the other way and brush down with the pink down the centre of your petal, all the way down to the tip. Like that. And then get your brush again and just do the very tip with some yellow. So it's quite delicate. Now I've got a red edible pen. What we're going to do once we've steamed each petal is we're going to put some dots on. I'll show you what that looks like on one that I've done. So this one has been steamed just by wafting in the kettle, and then using your edible felt tip, or if you don't have one, just for practice purposes, you can just use a normal felt tip because nobody's going to eat this. There's a wire in it, and it's just for practice. So then just draw down that centre deep vein that you scored in with your red pen, and then put some little dots along that sort of throat of the petal. So you need to make 6 of these. Make sure that they're nice and dry before you try and dust them. And then the next thing you need to do is to make the middle part of the flower, the filaments and the anthers and the stigma and style, I think, going back to my biology days. So you will need a thinner gauge wire and a small ball of paste. Bend the end of your wire so that it becomes a shepherd's crook, like that. Dip that into your edible glue, and then push so it's just a very small ball, push the wire down through. Just keep spinning, and then let that hook lock in on the ball of paste. And then you just want to shape that so that it comes to a tip and that your hook is well and truly covered like that. You need 6 of these, and we need to cover them brown. Now, if you don't have any brown paste, which you could just colour it with brown food colouring, you could do it in white like I've done, and then dip the whole of your bud in the glue and then roll it either in cocoa powder or instant coffee, but you might want to crush up your instant coffee granules a little bit, and that will give you some texture as well to your, I don't know what they are, filaments, anthers, something like that. I'm going to have to look it up. But you need 6 of those. And then the very last bit that you need to make is one central, I think it's called a stigma. And this is green, so you can either make this out of green paste or white, in exactly the same way as you did with the others. So you make your little shepherd's crook with a little ball, and then you pull it down so that it's got like a bulbous end and a thinner part coming down the wire. Then you take that, turn it upside down and rub it flat onto your board so that you get a flat top to your shape. So it looks a little bit like a golf tee. What you want to then do is to take either a cocktail stick or a knife or your veining tool and just mark a little cross on the top, just to give it the impression on the top. And then when that is dry, you then need to dust it with green dust, a mixture of green and yellow this is, and I don't know if you can see the cross being picked out on the top because of the dust. I've also brought the dust down the wire a little bit so that when you go to tape it all together, you don't have to go quite so high with the tape. So we've got one of these, 6 of the brown, and we will have made 6 petals as well. But as I said, leave those to dry before you dust them. What we were going to do is to dust them next week, unless you want to get ahead and do it next week. We're going to tape them next week and put them all together. And we're also going to make the leaves and a bud. Now, to make the bud, you do have to do one step of preparation. You'll need one quite thick wire that you form a shepherd's crook, and you want to make a bud shape of modelling paste. Dip the hook into some edible glue and then pull that down through the centre of your bud. Then pinch it all round to make sure that your wire is covered, and you do want to leave that to dry and set really hard on your stick, but that is going to be the basis of the bud for next week. If you have any of your polystyrene egg shapes, you could do the same. The difference is it makes it a much lighter thing to have in your wired flower eventually. This obviously makes the whole arrangement quite heavy because it's a ball of paste. But to get your ball or your polystyrene to stick onto your wire, you heat your wire in a naked flame and then push it straight into the polystyrene. It melts the polystyrene because it's hot and it will stick on there when it cools. So very clever. Sometimes they can work themselves loose, so it is always a good idea just to get a little ball of paste. And a little bit of glue. So I haven't got a brush with me, not a glue brush. So that's around the bottom, and then I'm just going to push that on around the very bottom and leave that on there, and hopefully that will stop it all from rattling around and you'll have a much better basis to work on. So look out for the email, which will have a template for a leaf. If anybody needs any floristry tape, give me a shout and I can drop some off or post them out to you. And there we go. So yeah, good luck. Bye bye.